Hi, I'm Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 43. But before I jump into it, um, wait a minute, wrong side. I want you to know that for the book Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young, there's now an audio version available. This is kind of, I've got the trilogy of Loretta books, but this is kind of the main biography. So if you have any real interest in Loretta, this is a must, okay? Now, podcast 43. This is about Loretta's relationships, including her children and friends. They were all at a distance. So one, I think it was a Sunday, Loretta was staying at her sister Polly Ann's home in West Los Angeles. Beautiful home that overlooked the Los Angeles Country Club. And Loretta invited me to come in because I'd have an opportunity to meet her grandson. He was Peter's son by his first marriage and lived in Northern California. His wife and toddler daughter accompanied him, and the child was really a beautiful little girl. She had blonde hair and blue eyes, looked like her dad. The Young family didn't stay long, but I was invited to remain for dinner. Later that evening, I asked Loretta, did that mean anything? Meeting your I guess it was really her great-granddaughter. I think I said granddaughter earlier. She hesitated for a second and then replied, well, no, not really. This was the kind of honesty that helped define the relationship I had with Loretta. If she said anything differently, I would have been surprised. I had observed Loretta's relationship with her grandchildren. She was never the kind of grandmother who counted the days until the next visit. So now, even with her children, there was a distance. She had insightfully said that when they were growing up, she had meant to be a good mother, but her career came first. And as an adult, I concluded that a different dynamic interfered with those relationships as they were adults. One day I told her about my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and how my brothers and sisters had erected in the backyard a big tent, had somebody erect it, a big tent for a celebration. Loretta's response was, I can't imagine my children doing anything like this for me. I replied, well, you have too much power in their lives, and I think they resent it. I then discussed the ways I thought she had so much power in their lives. I don't think she liked my assessment, but she did not. Wait a second, turn the page. She didn't disagree. Now, members of my own family were the only people I introduced to Loretta. I knew she wanted it that way. So many people had tried grabbing part of her over the years. Still, I'd have to say that Loretta was an extrovert. She was energized by social situations, and of course, she loved being the center of attention. I have a couple of Loretta's old address phone books full of the who's who in Hollywood from the 40s into the 60s. They're actors, directors, producers, as well as old and new money. When Loretta talked about these people, she'd invariably say, oh, I'm just crazy about them, which I think she was, but in the same way that high-powered business couples from the business world, people would float in and out of their lives with an intimacy that was both immediate but also passing. However, as the years went by, I better understood why some of Loretta's friendships were so superficial and why she wanted them that way. I knew a couple of women friends who would have been surprised that she thought of them as fans, even after knowing Loretta for a couple of decades and socializing with her often on a weekly basis. I was around long enough um, to see it from Loretta's viewpoint. These women were in her life because she was Loretta Young. They got what they wanted, and Loretta in turn benefited from the myriad tasks they were willing to assume for her. Now, there was a married couple who often hosted Loretta to an evening out to the best restaurants in Beverly Hills, and I was often included. The wife chaired, hold on, a big charity annually, and that was able to solicit stars to draw in guests willing to buy a table. And those people in turn had the expectations of mixing with famous people with famous names. For the rest of the year, our hostess liked to drop these names of the celebrities as if she were having coffee with them every day. Not true. Loretta invested very little into this friendship. They had her at their table, and that's what they wanted. There was an expression: if you had a movie star at your table in a restaurant, you were dressing the table. Now, Loretta loved dressing up and going to nice places, and that's what she got in return. The same couple hosted a gala birthday party for Loretta at Jimmy's in Beverly Hills. I think they thought it was her 80th birthday, but really it was only her 79th. Nevertheless, they had rented a large room and it was decorated like winter wonderland. I was told by another guest that the party cost $25,000. While I was dancing with Loretta that evening, she asked me, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm leading." She replied, "I can't remember the last time I danced with a man who led. Most of the time, they just more or less stand still, and I dance around them." I remember James and Gloria Stewart both looking cavaliers thin and not much more animated while conversing with them and thinking that they really should be home in bed. In fact, many of the guests looked like they should be home in bed. I didn't think that anyone was getting $25,000 worth of a good time. Now, there was another dinner party Loretta and I attended at a private home in Beverly Hills. I don't remember how Loretta was snarled into this one. She didn't know the host or hostess. That the house was cavernous with long, narrow windows in the living room. It looked like something out of a cartoon castle. I'm thinking of the castle Cinderella went to when she met Prince Charming. But anyway, the drapes ate up much of the wall space. Shortly after we arrived, Loretta and I were standing in the living room and wondering what her decorator mother, Gladys Belzer, would have thought. Just then, the hostess, apparently having observed us glancing about, approached. She must have assumed that we were favorably impressed because she said, "I decorated this room myself. Um, if you like the drapes, I can give you the name of my drapery maker, in Paris. Uh, I joined Loretta on another evening, dinner with a couple Loretta had known the wife for decades. And after she was widowed, she married a guy with some kind of low-level mafioso. Loretta's only stated objection about him was that he was an idiot. And there was an important hotel man who had hosted Loretta and me in New York, and then also entertained us for cocktails and dinner when he was staying at the Bel Air Hotel. Actresses Hope Lang and Elaine Stritch were also at the party. I could see that Loretta enjoyed the evening. I did too. But when we were driving back to her house from the Bel Air Hotel, Loretta talked about our host and lamented that he was really such a lost soul. He doesn't have a clue what matters because in his mind, it's all about this world. Now, I understood her point of view, but was fascinated by how she could compartmentalize her various lives. There were her cocktail friendships. Um, then there was the life with her daily mass and say the rosary crowd. There was her personal strong judgment about homosexuality. But then there were her frequent evenings enjoying the company of gay men and lesbian women. It's been written a number of times that Loretta, Rosalind Russell, and Irene Dunn were the three big Catholic female movie stars and that they were close friends. It's true that they and their husbands socialized frequently, but as Loretta once told me, we never discussed any personal problems. We were all supposed to be movie stars leading perfect lives. Loretta was also a genius at keeping the press at arm's length. And not long ago, on YouTube, I watched a 1986 interview with Loretta for Entertainment This Week. She was promoting her television movie Christmas Eve. Now, while watching this interview, I had to ask myself, who is this woman? Loretta's interview struck me as a performance, and underneath the formality was a subtext that communicated, ask me the wrong question, this interview is over. I was glad that this wasn't the Loretta I knew. And even within her family of origin, she had kept some distance. Now, Sally told me that in the late 30s, Loretta was importing something with the letter B. It was only later that her sisters discovered that she was engaged to a guy named Bill Buckner, a guy she never married. Loretta freely admitted that she grew up in a world of her own dreams, with Mama being her base of reality. And as mentioned earlier, Loretta never discussed Judy's origins with Tom Lewis during the 16 years they lived as husband and wife. Just as weird, he never asked. Talk about compartmentalizing to the extreme. As the years passed, I drew these additional conclusions. The closest person in Loretta's life had been her mother. I also suspected the same was true with Polly Ann and Sally, even though they had long-lasting marriages. By the time I knew these older sisters, both widows, I think their closest relationships were with each other, more so than with their own children. One time, Loretta's son Christopher said to me, I don't think there's any lost love between these women. I didn't challenge him, but I didn't agree. Now, granted, he had grown up as a family member and had a vantage point I'd never have. But I think that in the later years, I really had spent more time with him than he did. My take was this: even though there were often cross currents uh, of past and present animosities between these women, they turned to each other for a bedrock of support, the kind you get from those whom you shared your entire lives. Now, I saw that as love. I also know Loretta had a special love for a TV crew comprised mostly of men. Those 8 years ebbed both high and low for Loretta. It was her own assessment that she was enjoying her career peak during those TV years, and at the same time, her family life was falling into shambles. Tom had moved to New York and shortly thereafter arranged for his sons to come to visit. He then made a unilateral decision to keep them. So the love of Loretta's crew was crucial sustenance for the vulnerable star, and her feelings towards them ran deep. So much so that after a year off, she returned to TV in 1963 with a short-lived The New Loretta Young Show, just so that she could be working with him again. Now, I'll probably never really know what Loretta thought of me. She would tell me that she loved me, and I felt that on some level she did. I think she allowed herself to be vulnerable regarding things she was willing to disclose about herself to me, things I don't think she ever revealed to anybody else. I thought of that as a privilege, and I still look at it that way. Thank you.